Hi esteemed logicians. Welcome to the Logical Christ channel. In this video, we will undertake a logical examination on the Gnostic influences within the Quran. We will explore key Gnostic writings and compare them with Quranic verses which both existing in the 7th century AD. Sit back and relax, we will be back after this short intro.
For us Muslims, we don't use our logic.
The thesis. The assertion of Gnostic influence in the Quran posits that certain theological concepts and narratives within the Islamic holy book bear resemblances to Gnostic thought, particularly concerning the nature of Jesus, the concept of divine knowledge, and the material world. While Islam fundamentally asserts its divine and independent origin, a critical examination of these alleged parallels can illuminate the complex historical and intellectual landscape in which early Islam emerged. Understanding these points of comparison is crucial for a comprehensive logical analysis of the Quran's relationship with earlier religious movements. Thus, Prophet Muhammad's claimed revelations from God are questionable and critics pointing to the origin of those revelations. The assertion. The Quran is explicit enough on how unique and unparalleled its verses are. We can read the challenge of the Quran to bring verses like it in Quran 2:23-24, Quran 11:13 and Quran 17:88. The prior verse states, "And if you are in doubt about what we have sent down upon our servant, then produce a surah the like thereof." To meet the challenge of the Quran, we bring up the writings of the Gnostics from the 2nd century AD. When examining the Gnostic writings, we can match multiple verses from the Quran. Historically, Islam and the revelations given to Prophet Muhammad were developing in the 7th century AD. But the beliefs in Gnosticisms, even its writings, can be dated back in the 2nd century AD. Here's Professor Craig Evans on Gnosticism.
Well, the Gnostics were a group that most scholars think emerged probably in the early 2nd century. Some scholars have tried to argue that the group got underway a little earlier than that. The Gnostics were an interesting group, a diverse group, and so we need to be cautious about lumping them all together as though they all thought and believed the same thing. But these various groups of Gnostics, from the Greek word Gnostikos, which means one who knows, and so they're the knowers. They're knowers of absolute truth, the precise opposite of agnostic, a person who says ultimate truth can't be known. Well, the Gnostics believed that they had it all figured out.
The argumentation. In Quran 4:157-158, we learn that Jesus Christ was not crucified but was taken up to heaven. The same concept derived from the Gnostics prevalent in the 7th century. Let us hear what Dr. Bart Ehrman on this.
Gnosticism, the term comes from the Greek word for knowledge. The Greek word for knowledge is gnosis, spelled with a G. Gnosis means knowledge in Greek. There were a number of Christian groups in the 2nd and 3rd centuries especially, starting out probably somewhat after the New Testament period, who maintained that Jesus brought salvation not by dying on the cross and being raised again.
To meet the challenge of Quran 17:88, we bring the following. Quran 2:34 states, "And when we said to the angels, prostrate before Adam, so they prostrated, except for Iblis. He refused and was arrogant and became of the disbelievers." This Quranic verse is like in the book of the life of Adam and Eve 14:3. Composed in the 1st century AD and part of the Jewish apocryphal texts. Quran 5:110 states, "When you design from clay like the form of a bird by my permission, then you breathe into it, and it becomes a bird by my permission." This Quranic verse is clearly derived from the infancy Gospel of Thomas 2:3-5, which is dated from the 2nd century AD. Quran 5:112-115 states, "Jesus, the Son of Mary, O Allah, our Lord, send down to us a table from heaven to be for us a festival for the first of us and the last of us and a sign from you. And provide for us, and you are the best of providers." The surahs are like we found in the Gospel of Thomas, saying 19. These writings predated the Quran, and the Gospel of Thomas was proven to be a fabrication from the Gnostics. Quran 19:29-34 states, "How can we speak to one who was in the cradle as a child?" These Quranic verses are similar to the Arabic infancy Gospel 1:2-3, which can be dated to the 5th century AD, where it detailed how baby Jesus spoke from the cradle. Quran 19:22-26, Quran 23:50 states, "And we made the son of Mary and his mother a sign and sheltered them on a high ground having a spring." These Quranic verses is identical to the Gospel of Pseudo-Matthew chapter 20, dated back to the 6th century AD and a popular story in the time of Prophet Muhammad. Furthermore, there are more Quranic verses that we can match from the Gnostic writings in the early century AD. Amazingly, these Gnostic writings were dismissed by the early church and even scholars to be fabrications. Some Quranic verses have similarities from the Acts of the Youths of Ephesus from the 5th century, the Apocalypse of Peter dated from 2nd century AD, and the Gospel of James a 2nd century creation. These similarities validates the accusations of Meccans from the time of Prophet Muhammad and was revealed in Quran 10:38, it states, "Or do they say, he invented it? Say, then bring forth a surah like it and call upon whomever you can besides Allah, if you should be truthful." The conclusion. At this juncture, we can confidently claim that we have brought enough verses and Gnostic texts to meet the challenge of Quran 1788. Also, the presented analysis suggests a direct connection between Quranic narratives and Gnostic traditions, raising questions about the ultimate origin of Islamic scripture. If, as posited, the Quran directly quotes or draws from Gnostic writings, this implies a literary and theological dependence. The argument extends to suggest that Prophet Muhammad himself was evidently influenced by Gnosticism, inferring that core Islamic tenets may have been shaped by these non-canonical Christian thought systems rather than purely divine revelation. Consequently, given the scholarly consensus that many Gnostic writings are regarded as fabrications, apocryphal, or later elaborations distinct from the foundational narratives, the conclusion is drawn that the Quran's divine authority becomes questionable. This line of reasoning posits that a text derived from, or influenced by, unauthentic or fabricated sources cannot itself claim undisputed divine origin, thus inviting a re-evaluation of its foundational claims within critical scholarship. Here's Gnostic informant and Dr. Jason Reza Georgiani discussed about the potential source of Prophet Muhammad's revelations.
That the fingerprints of some of these Parthian feudal houses and of some of these Mithraic magi are on the Quran and the prophetic mission of Muhammad. And in particular, this character Salman the Persian, Salman Farsi, who people who were Muhammad's detractors claimed he was the one putting the Quran into Muhammad's head, and that, he was the puppet master on the scene there, right? He in particular seems to me to be connected to some of these Parthian feudal houses. And so I think that there were a lot of machinations involved at the origin of Islam that have been successfully hidden and poorly understood, and that it's possible that things got out of hand. Let me just leave it at that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like I was getting into the how they were sort of attacking the Eastern Roman Empire, but I totally can see how it's even more targeting the Persian Empire, and it explains why all of a sudden there's myths like, why does jinn end up in the Quran? Well, sure enough, in the Scythian myths, there's jinn in there. So what they're doing in these myths is they're subtly injecting stories and myths within the text that people would hear and be, oh yeah, I know that. Oh yeah, that makes, oh yeah, God would say that. That's got to be true. And whoever put this together, whether it was Muhammad or Salman or Ali or whoever,
It wasn't Muhammad. Muhammad was, Let me stop right there. I don't want to get you killed. I'm willing to step out and say certain things, but
I don't care. I actually know where you're going with this.
The guy was a moron. I'm sorry, he was a moron. And
I hear this all the time, and I think there's some truth to this. Like, he was, I hear from what I'm reading and putting together, is that he sort of was a good. So he's sort of historical. He's a merchant, so he's going around from city to city. So he's a perfect target for somebody to go carry a message. If he's going from Mecca to Egypt to here to there, you got this guy, right? And apparently he was very easy to manipulate and get him to do certain things. And you got behind the scenes this Solomon guy, who is really the one putting together. He's really the voice of Allah, and if it comes down to it.
Yeah, look, partly because of materialist reductionism, which wants to dismiss everything psychic, as pseudoscience. Even in theology, there's very much that current, and has been since, like rationalist Protestant theology in the 1800s. There's a de-emphasis on miracles and an intent to interpret everything miraculous as merely symbolic in the Bible and all this, right? Partly because of that, Muhammad has been badly misunderstood, and people think that Muhammad was like some kind of genius statesman, that we're dealing with like some kind of basically let's see, what would be a good example? I mean, I don't want to say Moses, but like some great religious figure fused with Caesar, and that's Muhammad. He's like a religious prodigy, and he's also a master statesman, who can go in there and create a constitution for the city of Medina and all this business. I don't buy any of it. The guy, I mean, I believe the Muslims when they say he was illiterate. I mean, the guy was, which by the way, there were a lot of literate people back in those days. This was before the dark ages of that region, and there were a lot of literate people back in those days. All right, people they think of medieval Europe, and no, there was a lot of literacy. In any case, Muhammad did not have the education, the intellect, the training, or any of the qualifications to come up with the Quran, first of all, and second of all, to act as such an effective statesman in Medina. The guy was a puppet of various forces that sent Salman al-Farsi and sent other people to guide Muhammad. One of the hadiths, the hadiths are the oral traditions preserved by the companions of the Prophet in Islam, right? And one of the most well-substantiated hadiths talk about how Muhammad, these white-robed figures would regularly come to meet with Muhammad, and he would go into a tent with them and sit with them in a circle, and no one else was allowed to come in when they were visiting. And then, they would get up and leave after a while. And so, whether it was Salman al-Farsi, or whether it was these robed figures, mysterious robed figures who would come to meet with Muhammad, or whether it was a detachment of Parthian knights wearing green from head to toe, which are described as an army of angels that turned Muhammad's fortune at the Battle of Badr, I think he had a lot of help, and people really set things up for him. He was a vehicle for various unseen forces that really, changed the course of human history.
I hope you learned from this video. Comment down below for your thoughts on this logical examination on the Gnostic influences within the Quran. Until next time.
Thinking with Logical Christ.